After 30 years of marriage, I thought I had a partner for life, someone who would be there for me through everything. Maggie and I weren't perfect, but we built a life together. We raised a daughter, Brandy, who I always believed had a good head on her shoulders. We had our ups and downs, but through it all, I believed in us. That belief was my biggest mistake. Looking back now, I can see the signs. It started subtly, small changes that didn't seem important at the time. Maggie suddenly became more affectionate, which I welcomed with open arms. She'd been distant for a while, but I chalked it up to work stress, to age, to the natural ebb and flow of a long marriage. So when she started kissing me more often, slipping into bed with me at night like she used to, I thought maybe we'd turned a corner. Maybe we were rekindling what we had. God, I was so stupid. I was so over the moon that I started planning something special, something to celebrate us. A cruise, a second honeymoon, a chance to remind each other of why we fell in love in the first place. I imagined standing on the deck, watching the sunset with Maggie by my side, just like we had all those years ago. But life had other plans. One evening, I got home early, eager to surprise her. Instead, I found Brandy sitting in the living room, alone. I didn't think much of it at first. I asked where her mother was, expecting the usual, out with friends, running errands, whatever. Brandy froze. She wouldn't meet my eyes. That was the first real gut punch. Something was wrong. She opened her mouth to say something, then closed it again. I felt my stomach tighten. I knew my daughter. She was never good at hiding things. "Dad," she finally whispered, "we need to talk." And just like that, the walls of my life started to crumble. I sat down, my heart already pounding. I didn't know what Brandy was about to say, but my gut told me it wasn't good. "We need to talk." That phrase always meant trouble. She hesitated, fidgeting with the sleeve of her sweater. "Mom, she's not where you think she is." I frowned. "What do you mean?" Brandy took a deep breath like she was bracing herself for impact. "She's with someone else right now, Dad." I laughed. I actually laughed, because the idea was so absurd. Maggie? My wife of 30 years? No way. Not possible. But Brandy didn't laugh with me. Her eyes were red, like she'd been crying before I even walked in. "You're wrong," I said, shaking my head. "That's not. She's with a man named Alexander," Brandy cut in, her voice breaking. "I told her it was okay. That you'd understand. But now I don't know." The room spun. I heard her words, but they didn't make sense. I felt like I was watching a movie, detached from reality. I swallowed hard. "You encouraged her." Brandy winced. She wiped at her face and nodded. I thought she deserved to be happy. She told me you two were in a rut, that she just needed something different, just once. I didn't think it would be this bad. I stood up so fast my chair scraped against the floor. My own daughter, my own flesh and blood, had helped my wife cheat on me. "I don't believe you," I snapped. "There's no way." Brandy flinched, but she didn't back down. "Check her messages." I stared at her, breathing hard. Then, with shaking hands, I pulled out my phone. Maggie and I shared an account, so I had access to her backups. I'd never had a reason to look before. I clicked on her messages and scrolled. And then I saw them. Texts. Hundreds of them. "Maggie, I can't wait to see you tonight. Alexander, you looked so sexy last time. I can still taste you. Maggie, shoo. I have to be careful. But I need this. I need you." My hands shook so hard I almost dropped the phone. Brandy didn't say anything. She didn't have to. My wife was cheating on me. And my daughter had helped her do it. I felt something inside me snap. I don't remember much after that. Just static in my head. My vision blurred, my ears rang, and I felt like I was outside my own body, looking down at some poor bastard whose world had just shattered. Brandy said something, but I didn't hear her. I was too busy scrolling through the messages, hoping, praying, for some kind of misunderstanding. Some kind of context that would make it all okay. There wasn't any. It wasn't just flirtation. It wasn't some harmless crush. It was full-blown, explicit, undeniable. I need this. I need you. Those words burned themselves into my brain. I slammed my phone onto the coffee table and stared at my daughter. How long? I asked. My voice didn't even sound like mine. Brandy wiped at her face. A few weeks. Maybe longer. I let out a bitter laugh. And you thought I'd be okay with it? She flinched. She told me you wouldn't leave her. That you loved her too much. That you'd understand. Understand what? I snapped. That my wife, your mother, is sneaking around with some other guy behind my back. That you helped her do it. Brandy covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking. I'd never raised my voice at her before. Not once. But this wasn't just about Maggie anymore. This was betrayal on a level I never thought possible. I grabbed my phone and stood up. Where is she? Brandy hesitated. Dad, please don't. Where is she? She finally whispered an address. Some hotel across town. I didn't recognize it, but it didn't matter. My hands clenched into fists. I need to go, I said, turning toward the door. Dad, please, Brandy begged, grabbing my arm. Don't do something you'll regret. I stared at her hand on my sleeve. My own daughter, the girl I had raised, had actively helped my wife cheat on me. And now she was trying to protect her instead of me. I yanked my arm free and looked her dead in the eye. I already regret everything. And then I walked out the door. I don't even remember the drive. I must have run at least 2 red lights, but I didn't care. My mind was locked on one thing, I needed to see it with my own eyes. Brandy's words, the texts, I couldn't accept it until I saw her. Until I saw them. The hotel was nothing fancy. One of those mid-range places with a clean lobby and neutral decor, the kind business travelers use. I parked, my grip white-knuckled on the steering wheel, my pulse pounding in my ears. I sat there for a minute, trying to breathe, trying to think. What was I going to do? Burst into the room and drag her out? Confront them in the hallway? A part of me wanted to. A part of me wanted to kick the damn door down and scream in her face. But I didn't. I needed to be smart. I walked inside and straight to the front desk. The guy behind the counter barely looked up. Checking in. I shook my head. I'm here to surprise my wife, I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. She's meeting a friend here. Blonde, about this tall. I gestured vaguely. The guy smirked. Lots of blondes, sir. I swallowed my pride and pulled out a $50. Slid it across the counter. She's here with a man. Can you at least tell me the room number? He hesitated, glancing around, then sighed and checked the computer. Room 214, he muttered. I turned on my heel before he could say anything else. The hallway felt too bright, too clean. Like a place where nothing bad should ever happen. My feet felt heavy as I walked toward the door, my breath coming in short bursts. And then I heard it. Muffled voices. Laughter. A woman's voice, her voice. My stomach twisted. I didn't think. I didn't hesitate. I knocked. Silence. Then, shuffling. A man's voice, low and questioning. Then Maggie's. Who is it? I clenched my jaw. Open the door, Maggie. A pause. Then footsteps. The door cracked open, just a few inches. And there she was. My wife. Wrapped in a robe. Hair tousled. Cheeks flushed. Like she already belonged to another man. Her eyes went wide. Jason. I pushed the door open before she could stop me. And there he was. Some middle-aged asshole, half-dressed, standing behind her. Alexander. My entire world shattered. For a second, none of us moved. Maggie stood frozen in the doorway, her mouth slightly open like she couldn't believe I was actually here. Alexander, because I knew without a doubt this was Alexander, had the nerve to just stand there, bare-chested, his shirt draped over a chair like he was getting comfortable. The bastard didn't even look guilty. I stepped inside. Maggie took a quick step back, her robe tightening around her as if that would somehow shield her from what was happening. Jason, she finally said, her voice breathy, like she'd just run a marathon. What are you? How did you? I held up my phone, shaking with rage. Your texts, Maggie. Your own goddamn words. Her face went pale. Alexander cleared his throat. Listen, man. I turned on him so fast he actually took a step back. Shut your mouth, I growled. You don't speak to me. Not one fucking word. He held up his hands like some peace-loving idiot, but I wasn't looking at him anymore. My eyes were on Maggie. The woman I had loved for 30 years. The woman I had built a life with. The woman who had looked me in the eyes every morning and told me she loved me, while sneaking around with him. Why? I asked. My voice was quieter now, but it carried so much more weight. Tell me why, Maggie. She swallowed hard. Jason, please, let's talk about this in private. No, I shook my head. We talk now. She wrapped her arms around herself, like she was the victim here. I didn't mean for it to get this far. I laughed. Actually laughed. It was bitter, sharp, and full of disbelief. That's what you're going with? I didn't mean for it to get this far. Her lips trembled. I was lonely, Jason. I felt like we were just going through the motions. Like we weren't us anymore. I felt something inside me crack. So your solution was this? I gestured to Alexander, who had the decency to look uncomfortable. Not talking to me, not trying to fix things, just fucking someone else. She flinched at the word, but I didn't care. Jason, she whispered, tears welling in her eyes, I love you. I stared at her. She actually had the audacity to say that. I clenched my fists, my entire body shaking. No, Maggie. You don't love me. I stepped back, my voice cold and final. Because if you did, this never would have happened. She let out a choked sob. But I was done. I turned and walked out, slamming the door behind me. And for the first time in my life, I didn't look back. I don't even remember walking out of that hotel. One moment I was standing in that room, staring at the wreckage of my marriage, and the next I was in my car, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. I sat there, breathing hard, my mind racing in circles. Maggie had looked shocked to see me. Like I was the one who had done something wrong. Like she was the victim. And that asshole, Alexander, just stood there. Didn't apologize. Didn't look guilty. Just some middle-aged fucker who saw an opportunity and took it. I almost drove back home right then and there. Almost let the weight of it all crush me. But then I thought about what I had just witnessed, about what my wife had done, and something inside me snapped into place. No. I wasn't going to sit around and wait for her to come home, fake some tears, and try to manipulate her way out of this. I wasn't going to let her control the situation. I drove straight to the house and marched inside, my body moving on pure adrenaline. Brandy was still there, sitting on the couch with her head in her hands. She looked up as soon as I came in. "Dad," she whispered. I ignored her. Walked right past, straight to the bedroom. I grabbed a duffel bag from the closet and started shoving Maggie's clothes inside. Shirts, dresses, whatever my hands touched. Brandy appeared in the doorway, eyes wide. "What are you doing? What does it look like?" I snapped, yanking open drawers. She took a shaky breath. "Dad, please. Just talk to her." I let out a cold laugh. I did talk to her. She was still in a fucking robe when I did. Brandy winced, looking like she might cry again. But I didn't care. I went to our bathroom next, dumping Maggie's makeup and toiletries into a garbage bag. "Dad, you don't have to do this," Brandy pleaded. I turned to face her. "You knew." She flinched. "You knew and you didn't say a damn word to me," I said, voice shaking. "You helped her. My own daughter." Tears spilled down her cheeks. I thought she just needed one night. I thought you'd forgive her, that it wouldn't." I shook my head, disgusted. "Get out." Brandy's eyes went wide. "What?" "Get out," I repeated. "Go home to your husband, Brandy. Because I can't even look at you right now." She let out a strangled sob. "Dad, please. Now." She hesitated for a second. Then, finally, she turned and ran out of the house, crying. I barely heard the door slam. I was too busy emptying out my wife's life from my home. By the time I was done, the bedroom looked like a hurricane had ripped through it. Maggie's clothes were stuffed into garbage bags, her jewelry thrown into a shoebox, and every trace of her in my space had been erased. I stood there for a moment, breathing hard, my hands shaking. The anger was still there, burning in my chest, but underneath it, something else had started to creep in. A hollowness. I had loved this woman. Spent 30 years of my life with her. And now, I was cleaning her out like she was just trash. But that's what she had treated me like, wasn't it? I clenched my jaw and grabbed my phone. Maggie hadn't called. Hadn't texted. Not even a half-assed excuse. She was probably still with him. The thought made my stomach turn, but I forced myself to focus. There was still more to do. I went to the office, logged into our joint accounts, and started making changes. First, I transferred half of our savings into a separate account. I wasn't stupid, I knew divorce was coming, and I wasn't about to let her screw me over financially after already screwing me over in every other way. Then, I canceled our credit cards. Froze the joint ones. Blocked her from access. Let her try to book another hotel room now. I was in the middle of changing the locks online when I heard the front door open. My whole body went rigid. Footsteps. Then her voice. "Jason." Slowly, I stood up and stepped into the hallway. And there she was. Maggie. Her eyes were red and puffy like she'd been crying, but I didn't care. She took one look around, the packed bags, the empty hangers, the garbage bags by the door, and sucked in a sharp breath. "Jason, please," she whispered. "Let's talk." I stared at her, feeling nothing but ice in my veins. "There's nothing to talk about, Maggie." Maggie looked around the house like she was seeing it for the first time. Her gaze lingered on the garbage bags full of her clothes, the empty spaces on the walls where I had already taken down our wedding photos. She swallowed hard. "Jason, please. Just let me explain." I crossed my arms. "Explain what, Maggie? How you fucked another man in a hotel room while I was planning a goddamn second honeymoon for us?" She flinched. "I never wanted to hurt you." I laughed, short, bitter, and sharp. "Well, congratulations. You failed. Tears welled up in her eyes. I made a mistake. I shook my head. No, Maggie. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. A mistake is burning dinner. You didn't make a mistake. You made a choice. Over and over again. She took a shaky breath. I was lonely, Jason. I felt like we weren't us anymore. Like something was missing. I clenched my jaw. And instead of talking to me, instead of trying to fix it, you decided to go fuck him? Maggie winced at the harshness of my words, but I didn't care. I wanted her to feel it. I wanted her to feel even an ounce of the pain she had dumped onto me. I didn't mean for it to go this far, she whispered. I let out a humorless chuckle. Right. It just happened. She nodded desperately, like that would somehow make it all okay. Yes. I got caught up, and I made a horrible decision. But Jason, I love you. I never stopped loving you. I stared at her, my anger so sharp it could have cut through steel. No, Maggie. You don't love me. You loved what I gave you. The security. The stability. The man who always put you first. I took a step forward, lowering my voice. But you sure as hell didn't love me. Tears spilled down her cheeks. Please, we can fix this. We can go to counseling. We can. No. Her breath hitched. Jason. I shook my head, my voice cold and final. We're done. She covered her mouth, a broken sob escaping her lips. I didn't care. I walked past her, grabbed the garbage bags by the door, and tossed them outside. When I turned back to face her, she was just standing there, shaking. You need to leave, I said. Her lip trembled. Where am I supposed to go? I shrugged. I don't know. Maybe ask Alexander. Her face crumpled, but I didn't stay to watch. I walked into the bedroom and slammed the door behind me. For the first time in my life, I slept alone. Maggie didn't leave right away. She stood in the hallway, crying, whispering my name like that would somehow fix everything. I didn't answer. I didn't open the door. Eventually, I heard the front door creak open, then shut. Silence. I waited a few minutes before stepping out. The house felt different, emptier, colder. I looked at the pile of her things by the door. She was really gone. I should have felt relief. Maybe even victory. Instead, I just felt tired. I sat down, staring at nothing, letting the weight of everything settle in. 30 years. Gone in a matter of hours. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I hadn't slept at all. The house was dead silent. No sound of Maggie making coffee. No quiet hum of the shower running. Just emptiness. For a split second, I forgot everything. I reached over to her side of the bed, only to find cold sheets. And then it all came crashing back. I forced myself up. There was still work to do. I spent the day making sure she had nothing left here. Called a locksmith to change the locks. Met with my bank to secure my accounts. Contacted a lawyer. Every move I made was deliberate, cutting her out of my life one piece at a time. She texted me once. Maggie, please, Jason. Can we just talk? I didn't respond. By nightfall, I felt lighter. Not happy, not yet, but I was finally in control. Maggie had made her choice. Now, I was making mine. Maggie kept trying. The texts started piling up. At first, they were apologetic. Then desperate. Maggie, Jason, please. Just talk to me. Maggie, I made a mistake, but we can fix this. Maggie, I don't want to lose you. I ignored every single one. Then Brandy reached out. Brandy, Dad, please don't shut me out. I'm sorry. I didn't know it would end like this. I stared at my phone for a long time. I wanted to forgive her. She was my daughter. But she had helped Maggie do this to me. And I wasn't sure if I could ever look at her the same way again. I turned my phone off and sat in silence. Maggie and Brandy wanted to talk now, but where were they when I was the one being betrayed? Let them sit with their choices. Just like I had to. A few days passed, and Maggie finally stopped texting. Instead, I got a call from my lawyer. She had officially been served divorce papers. It felt surreal. 30 years of marriage reduced to a stack of legal documents. I thought she'd fight it. Try to drag things out. But instead, she just signed. No contest. No demands. Maybe she finally realized there was nothing left to save. Brandy, on the other hand, wasn't letting go so easily. She showed up at my house, knocking, pleading for me to just talk to her. I stood on the other side of the door, silent. I wasn't ready. Not yet. She made her choice. Now, she had to live with it. Maggie moved out officially a week later. She didn't try to see me. Didn't try to argue. Just quietly disappeared from the house we built together. Brandy, though, wouldn't let go. She kept calling, leaving voicemails, begging me to talk. Then I got a text from her husband, Mike. Mike, I had no idea she was involved in this. I'm sorry, man. I don't know what to do with her right now either. Even he was struggling to look at her the same way. I wasn't ready to forgive. Maybe one day. Maybe never. But right now, I needed to focus on myself. Maggie and Brandy had lost me. And I wasn't sure if they'd ever get me back. After Maggie signed the divorce papers, reality started setting in. I wasn't just ending a marriage, I was ending the life I thought I'd grow old with. For the first time in 30 years, I was alone. No one waiting for me when I came home. No familiar routines. Just silence. And honestly, it hurt like hell. I kept replaying it in my head, searching for where things went wrong. Had I missed something? Had I pushed her away without realizing it? But every time I started doubting myself, I remembered the texts. The hotel room. The way she looked at me after she got caught, not with love, not with regret, but with fear of what would happen next. She didn't love me. She just loved the stability I gave her. And as much as I wanted to fix things with Brandy, I wasn't ready. She had been a part of this. She had encouraged her mother to betray me. And even if she regretted it now, she had still watched me break and said nothing. Mike called me again, this time sounding more exhausted than anything. She won't stop crying. She keeps saying she ruined everything. I didn't respond right away. Because she did ruin everything. And I didn't know if I had it in me to forgive her. Maggie, though. There was nothing left there. I didn't hate her, I just felt nothing for her anymore. I packed up what was left of her things and drove to her new apartment. Left them outside the door. Didn't knock. By the time I got home, I had made my decision. I was selling the house. There was no future for me in that place anymore. Too many memories. Too many ghosts. It was time to start over. Selling the house wasn't just a decision, it was a statement. I wasn't going to sit around in a home filled with memories of a life that no longer existed. I wasn't going to wake up every morning and be haunted by the echoes of a woman who threw everything away for a cheap thrill. So, I listed it. It sold faster than I expected. Within a month, I had an offer. I took it without hesitation. The night before I left, I stood in the empty living room, looking at the space where our couch used to be. Where we sat together every night. Where I had proposed to Maggie, back when love had felt unbreakable. Funny how things change. She called while I was packing. This time, I answered. Dad, she whispered, relief flooding her voice. You actually picked up. I didn't say anything. Just waited. She took a shaky breath. I don't expect you to forgive me. I need you to know how sorry I am. I leaned against the kitchen counter. Why did you do it, Brandy? She hesitated. Then, finally, she said, Mom told me she felt trapped. That she'd never gotten to be with anyone else. That she just wanted to feel wanted again. I thought if I encouraged her, it would be harmless. Just a one-time thing. I closed my eyes, swallowing the bitter taste in my mouth. You thought it was harmless? She let out a quiet sob. I didn't think it would destroy us. I didn't think she'd throw everything away. I was stupid. And now Mike doesn't trust me, you won't talk to me, and I don't even know who I am anymore. I sighed. Brandy. I love you. You're my daughter. But I don't know when, if, I'll be able to forgive you for what you did. Her breath hitched. I hope you and Mike figure things out, I said. But you need to figure yourself out first. She cried harder, but I didn't comfort her. That wasn't my job anymore. When the call ended, I felt lighter. Not because I had forgiven her, but because I had finally said it. The day I left, I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I withdrew enough money to start fresh and bought a one-way ticket to Ecuador. Why Ecuador? Because it was far away. Because it was warm. Because it was a place where no one knew my name, where I wasn't Jason, the betrayed husband. Just Jason. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. Maggie lost everything. Brandy had to live with her choices. And me? I was finally free.